to another episode of the Modern Manifestation Podcast. I'm your host, Bree Brown, a lettuce-hating, wine-loving, curses like a sailor, recovering perfectionist. Having thrived in a male-dominated, commission-based industry, I'm passionate about helping women boldly pursue their life goals. In this space, we build confidence with our mindset, manifestation, and spirituality. I believe that your life manifests as a result of who you are, not what you do, and that your personality creates your personal reality. Join this growing community to increase your net worth by increasing your self-worth. Now let's jump into today's topic. Hello, my beautiful souls, and welcome back to the Modern Manifestation Podcast. Today, I want to talk about something that comes up for me quite a bit whenever we approach the holiday season, and that is the tendency to want to stay stuck in old narratives and the implications of doing that. The reason I want to talk about this going into the holidays is because I find that so many of us live in our past stories, and these are often triggered whenever we go to see family and the roles that we assume with them. And when we do this, we have a tendency to use our past stories as evidence for why things are the way they are. And then we allow ourselves to remain stuck instead of moving forward. And we've all met these people. Hell, I have been that person more times than I care to admit. It's someone who doesn't sing because they were made fun of for singing in high school. It's someone else who doesn't share emotions because they were picked on for being emotional in 5th grade. It's another person that thinks they're bad at math because they failed a test in junior high. And when we're with our families, oftentimes they have narratives and they have stories about us that haven't been modified, and we continue to subscribe to those narratives as well and how we interact with them as a result. But whatever the event was, or whatever belief it created, the work can't stop there. As aware adults, it becomes our responsibility to work through our own shit, and we can't use our past as a reason not to. And yes, our past can explain some of our current circumstances, but that doesn't mean that it should define our future potential. We have to be willing and able to let some of these things go as we progress. And from personal experience, I did not follow this advice for a long time, and I told myself things like, I wasn't as successful as I wanted to be, but not because of me or my hard work ethic or anything like that, but it was because I didn't come from money, and those who did had it way easier. And that was my favorite excuse, my favorite story, because it was logical, it felt very valid, and yeah, it does hold some truth. But telling myself that story every day, it didn't empower me to make any change. It was a crutch. And that belief trapped me. And it made me feel hopeless against something that I couldn't control. Like, why would I go pick up the phone, or why would I do any business development and call a prospect if I assumed they wouldn't take me seriously without family connections? Or if they knew we didn't hang out in the same spaces, we didn't go to the same schools, we don't come from the same socioeconomic background. Old stories can keep us with the habits they created. And those habits don't serve us because otherwise our circumstances would be different. Otherwise, you might not be tuning into this podcast episode. So when I began to reframe my own narrative, I created more space to change my habits and therefore my actions. And I stopped seeing my background as a limitation, and I started seeing it as fuel. I wasn't unsuccessful because of my past. I was ambitious in spite of it. And my past didn't keep me down. It instead made me someone that would appreciate success so much more because of it. Someone who could get told no 100 times a day, and I wasn't fazed by it because I'd heard it 1,000 times before throughout my life. So in a way, I was a lot more desensitized to the word no than someone who came from wealth would ever be. So I began to see my ability to make cold calls from a very different perspective. I could do what I needed to do to become successful because of my past. So do you see how instead of it being a crutch, it then became an edge? And we all came into this world with a different set of circumstances, and some people have really shitty circumstances, but we're not here to compare our suffering. We're here to move forward. So whatever that was, whatever that baggage is, this is your call to deal with it emotionally, to do what you need to do to really work through that, because ruminating gives our power away. And you're not here listening to this because you're powerless. You're here listening because something deep inside you knows how fucking powerful you are. And it's looking for that reminder. And it's looking for clues to help claw back your own personal creator. So while our experiences growing up were not our fault, we have to choose how they influence us as we get older. Because once we become aware, we accept responsibility. We have to decide to change. Defining your life based on past experiences will only keep you there if you keep doing that moving forward. And the stories we tell ourselves about what's happened to us, those stories directly shape the reality we live in now. So if you don't like your story, rewrite it. And we'll talk about that a little bit here in a second. But first, let's just jump into a little bit about how memory works, how our brains work, so you can understand some of the tools we're going to talk about later. Memory is not retrieval, it's reconstruction. In the world of neuroscience, you have metacognition, our ability to think about how we think. This is a gift that is specific to the human race, and this is the gift that gives us agency over ourselves, over how our mind works and the things that we do moving forward. And so using metacognition, while we can't change what happened to us, we can change how we perceived that event and how that informs future decisions. And here's something really fascinating. I touched on this a second ago. Neuroscience tells us that memory is not like replaying a video clip in our mind. Because if it were, everyone would remember the past events the exact same way. Memory is a reconstruction. And every time we recall a past event, a memory, a moment, our brain pulls together fragments of stored information all around our brain, and it rebuilds that event in real time. Not just based on how we felt then in the moment when we experienced it originally, but more importantly, it reconstructs it based on how we feel right now in the present moment. The current version of who you are and how you are feeling determines how you remember the past. So your memory literally molds itself to fit the narrative you're currently telling about your life. And it can be empowering, or it could be, is dispowering a word? I'm not sure, dispowering. So your current mood rewrites your past. And this phenomenon is referred to in psychology as mood congruent recall. The emotion you're feeling right now acts as a filter for your memories. So how does that play out? Let's say that you are experiencing some anxiety, some sadness. Your brain is naturally going to gravitate toward memories that made you feel anxious and sad. It's going to confirm whatever bias, whatever memory or whatever feeling you're currently in. So when you're in a good mood, happy memories will come to mind more easily. It's like your emotional state determines the TV channel you're able to tune into, and those are the memories you have access to. But here's where it gets even more interesting. We don't just recall different types of memories based on our mood. We don't just recall happy memories when we're happy and sad memories when we're sad. We can actually change the memory themselves or the emotional connotation of a memory based on our present moment. So, for example, let's say that you have a neutral memory. Maybe you had a regular conversation with someone. It was very middle of the road, no strong feelings about that situation. But if you recall that same memory, that same conversation while you're feeling particularly stressed or upset, then your brain can restore that particular moment in time as one that was more negative than it actually was. So you might add tension to someone's tone. You might read more hostility into their words that were otherwise neutral. Or you might remember that the other person was dismissive when they were just distracted. And the crazy thing is that we're not even aware that we're doing this. And this is what leads to so many issues. And it's interesting to be aware of this habit and this tendency of ours. So let's talk about how this could play out in real time over the holidays. Let's say, for example, that you make a neutral comment to your sister over dinner. Nothing dramatic, just a casual remark. But over the next few years, she starts going through a tough time. Maybe she's dealing with feeling unsupported by her family. Maybe something's going on at work. She's just feeling very undervalued, unappreciated. And then each time she thinks back to that last Thanksgiving dinner you guys had together, and she's still experiencing that anger, that hurt, she might unconsciously add details that weren't there. Maybe she remembers you having a really sharp tone. Maybe she remembers you asking a question as a way to be critical instead of genuinely curious. And maybe you looked in the other direction and all of a sudden in her memory, that became an eye roll. And every time she revisits this memory and she's in that negative state, more and more details are added and it might become more and more negative over the years. And so fast forward 5 years down the road, you're in an argument and all of a sudden she's like, well, and I can't believe you yelled at me that one Thanksgiving and you rolled your eyes and I know you've never appreciated me or the work that I do. And all of a sudden, you feel blindsided because from your perspective, that never happened. And so you start to think that she's intentionally being malicious or exaggerating. And on the other hand, she feels like you are gaslighting her or rewriting the story to make yourself look better. And now that we know what we know about memory, who's right? The truth is, they're both right and they're both wrong. Both people genuinely remember it the way that they reconstruct it. Each person genuinely remembered that experience differently. Doesn't make either one of them right or wrong. Neither is lying. They just reconstructed the memory through completely different emotional filters over time. And so the memory that they have 5 years down the road, they're like two completely different situations. And this is what makes memory so powerful, but also so dangerous if we're not aware of it. We remember past events through our present emotional filters. And most of us have no idea that we're editing a story every time we retell it. So you could see how this could, over time, easily make someone more pessimistic or optimistic if they tend to be in a good mood when they go down memory lane, or they tend to be in a bad mood when they go down memory lane, or they're looking for justification for other times in life when life really sucked. That could very easily make you someone that leans more positive or negative. So this tells us that the stories we tell ourselves about what's going on right now and the memories we retrieve or the memories we reconstruct, they shape our worldview. They shape what we see and how we interact with everything and everyone around us. And here's a personal example of mine that's been coming up a lot lately as we are dealing with my grandmother getting older. My entire life, which I did not realize until more recently, but now that I reflect back, my entire life, my grandma has been one of the most negative people I know. Love her, but very negative. And I didn't notice this for a long time because my whole family is pretty pessimistic and critical, myself included. I have really worked on that, but that was sort of my background, my exposure. So I began to notice that every conversation I've had with my grandma somehow turned into a story about how rude someone was, how she could tell they didn't like her, or how someone tried to screw her over or steal from her or something like that. And, statistically speaking, she's not the Unabomber, right? Like, grandma can't possibly be unlucky enough to meet every rude person within a 20-mile radius of her. It's just not realistic. So here's what's actually happening. Grandma is filtering all of her interactions through her past stories and how they influence her current self-image. She's looking for that confirmation bias, if you will, for her current circumstances. And unfortunately, she spent years getting abused physically and emotionally, so she genuinely believes that she's unworthy, unlikable, and unwanted. It's heartbreaking, but that has become her filter. Her early wounds shaped how she still views herself and the world around her today. It tells her how safe she can be. And while she's not responsible for what happened to her, she is responsible for how that continues to influence her life now. Recently, my brother invited her to a family gathering where everyone was going to get together. And I was standing right there and he just said, "Hey, Grandma, would love to have you come by. We can come pick you up if you'd like to join us." And a week later, when I was on the phone with her, she said, "Well, your brother asked me if I want to come to this gathering, but he really implied he didn't want me to be there. It was in his tone. I could tell. I'm just a burden. He doesn't want to come get me. He practically told me to just go ahead and stay home." And mind you, I was standing right there when he made the ask, and I don't recall any of that happening. From my perspective, he seemed very welcoming at that moment. But her version of that memory perfectly fit her ongoing story. The story that people don't want me around. I am unwanted. In the past, she was abused for just existing. And so, of course, she has these really deep wounds that have to be worked through. And at 83, I'm not saying that she is going to do that. But it really sucks that that's something that she's carried with her entire life. And I don't want you to get to your 80s and still have a lot of this baggage carrying around. I want you to clear this. I want you to start working on it now. And no matter how much we reassure Grandma, the story she tells herself will always win because her brain is working hard to rewrite the memories to validate that belief. And she's not even aware it's happening. And we all do this to different degrees. But thankfully, this also means that we can use this phenomenon to reshape our narratives, and as a result, our identities moving forward. So, are you someone who allows an old story to keep you stuck in a current circumstance or current way of being? Or are you willing to become someone that allows a past story to influence who you want to grow into now? That's the difference. Do you want to stay stuck or do you want to grow from? And each choice is yours. I don't personally care what you do. I'd love if you chose the option to grow, but that's your prerogative. And I want to focus on these old stories because these past stories, these past events that we've gone through, they directly influence the choices we make today. Whether you take that job, whether you choose love again, whether you finally pursue that PhD, whatever it is, you can't change the events themselves from your past, but you can absolutely change what they mean and how they shape your future moving forward, or the decisions you make as a result of them. The past can inform our decisions, but it doesn't have to define who we are becoming. We get to change that. So let's jump into how to rewrite some of these stories now that you know a little bit about how the memory works. The first thing we can do when thinking about our past stories, whatever the experience or memory was, you get to choose which ones you address first. As I'm talking, there's probably a couple memories that have come to mind already. Great, start there, start with those. And when you revisit those memories, focus on changing the emotional connotation of that past story with a process called neuroassociative conditioning. And what that is that we could deliberately recall a memory through a different emotional frame. So you can go back to a really negative experience that you had while in a state of joy, humor, growth, acceptance, whatever that more positive emotion is. Maybe even it's just neutral at this point. And when we do that, we literally start to reshape the neural pathways tied to that event. And it's probably not going to happen in one moment, but as you continue to recall that memory from a better place, from a better emotional state, and instead of allowing your present self to be impacted and drawn back into that particular emotion, try to bring that emotion back to where you are now. And if you've ever gone to a Tony Robbins event, this is something that he does a lot. You visualize an old painful memory that normally makes you feel sad or mad or whatever it is, frustrated, and then you put yourself in a better emotional state and you try to reimagine that particular moment from the place of feeling good and try to change something, make it more comical. So maybe you turn your ex into a cartoon character, or maybe you imagine the situation that you experienced as a really ridiculous SNL skit. Just weaken the emotional charge attached to it in some way. And if you are a Harry Potter fan like I am, it's like facing the Bogart, right? Like you are taking this memory that you experienced and then you're transforming it from one that maybe sparks fear or frustration into one that makes you feel amused. You're transforming it in some way. The next thing we can do is reframe the self-narrative using effective adaptation. And this is the process of reinterpreting past events as growth opportunities to lower stress and increase your overall happiness. So while the other one was trying to change details and moments about that memory to help you build a new emotional connotation around it, this particular type is retelling a painful event as one that helped build something more positive. So maybe it helped you build some courage, empathy, clarity, finding a way to make that past memory work for you in some way instead of why it held you back. And then each time you do this, and I actually think this one's a little easier than the whole Bogart thing, but that's just me. But every time you do this, you strengthen the new identity that aligns with who you're becoming. And this can really help you transform your negative self-talk into more empowering narratives. So maybe you have a thought of, I failed that relationship, or I stayed too long, or I didn't do my best. You could start rewording these past memories as, that relation taught me how to communicate more honestly. I learned a lot about myself in that time. I did the best I could with the information I had at the time. I didn't know what it was like to be in a relationship with a narcissist then, but I do now, and I'll never be in that situation again. You start to shift the meaning of that story. And then after you've done that, maybe the next step is, I gained so much courage because I had to learn how to be brave in a really shitty situation. Or, I gained a lot of clarity about what I don't want having been in that relationship. When you shift the meaning of a story, you shift the emotion itself. And when you shift that emotion, your thoughts and behaviors will soon follow, and so do your actions. So before we head out for today, I'm going to give you 2 journaling exercises you can do to help with this, as well as 1 action item you can take. I mean, I guess they're all action items, but 2 are more like writing-centric and the other one isn't. The first one is story revision. Write about whatever the memory is, whatever the situation is that's coming up. Write about that from 3 different perspectives. One of the victim, one of the survivor, and one of the learner. And just look at what each perspective going through that same emotion reveals to you. And just note what's important about that. Which one feels the best? And then which story do you want to adopt moving forward? How do you want to change how you view that situation moving forward? Another one is mindful recall. So when the old memory surfaces, maybe you journal about what you gained from that experience rather than what you lost. And this is very much tied to story revision, so you could probably just do these two things together. But I do think it's important to be really intentional to talk through how this moment might have served your evolution in some way. But you could easily combine those. And then the other one is do something today that contradicts an old story. An action that represents who you want to be and not who you were. For example, if someone once told you that you were an awful artist, and that's always kept you from being creative and from going out and pursuing the things you want to do. Okay, well then go out and sign up for an art class. Fuck that response. You get to decide whether or not you're an artist, not that person in 6th grade. So go out, sign up, do something that contradicts an old story, whatever that is. Someone told you couldn't sing? Great, go do karaoke. Each time you engage in one of these exercises, you begin to strengthen the new neural connections that will support your healing, that will help you reframe your own narratives. And that's important because in the manifestation world, every story we tell about ourselves carries a vibration. So we need to be thoughtful about our memories, about our past, about the stories we allow them to infer about who we are today. And just because we change the lens through which we view our past does not mean that we're erasing. It just means that we're transforming it into wisdom. We're transforming it into something that gets to serve us as opposed to something that weighs us down. Because as we get to change how old stories make us feel, we get to free ourselves from having to relive them. We get to reclaim our story, reclaim our power. And that's when we really get to live, not as a victim of our memories or our circumstances, but as these conscious creators, these people that get to define our own futures. And that's the beauty of letting go of these old stories. We get to create space for new realities because we are not our past. We are the author of what comes next. Thank y'all so much for hanging out with me today. Have a fantastic rest of your week, and I will catch y'all in the next episode. Until then, go out there and manifest some miracles. I hope y'all enjoyed today's episode. If you want to check out the show notes, head over to www.themodernmanifestation.com/blog. If you're loving this podcast, please drop me a review, share this episode with a loved one, and follow me on Instagram @modernmanifestation. I love y'all so much, and thanks for listening.